The royal hall of Arendor shimmered under twin moons, walls of silver light and veins of glowing crystal echoing the silent tension that filled the air. Every noble, every general, every elder of the alien empire stared in disbelief toward the raised throne. There she stood, Princess Elira Valon, daughter of the Empress, heir to the celestial crown. Her translucent skin gleamed like moonlit glass, and eyes the color of soft amethyst reflected unwavering resolve. The moment she spoke, her voice rippled across the chamber like a melody born of storm and grace. "I want a human." The hall erupted into chaos, gasps, whispers, shock. Some shouted blasphemy, others disbelief. The counselors exchanged frantic glances, while the Empress herself, majestic and cold as the stars, slowly rose from her crystal throne. "You will repeat that, Elira," the Empress demanded, her tone neither raised nor calm but something in between, sharp enough to silence the galaxy itself. Elira did not flinch. "Mother, I have decided. I wish to take a human as my chosen bond. My heart has made its choice." The words fell like thunder. Humans were a primitive species to the Arendorans, fragile, emotional, driven by chaos and dreams. They were tolerated, sometimes studied, but never honored. To even mention them in the royal court as equals was unthinkable. But Elira's eyes carried something no royal decree could erase: conviction. General Sator, commander of the Empire's fleets, broke the stunned silence. "Your Highness, with respect, humans are not suitable even for service in the Imperial Guard. They lack telepathic link, discipline, and longevity. To suggest bonding with one is an act of disgrace," hissed Elder Velen, his silver robes trembling. "Have you lost your mind, child of the stars?" Elira only smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but I have also found something greater." The Empress descended the steps, her crown burning like a comet's heart. "You are to marry within the lineage of the ascendant houses. That is law. Our kind has maintained purity for millennia. You will not, cannot, undo that." "Then I reject the lineage," Elira said softly. The words stunned even her mother. No royal had ever spoken defiance in public. Yet in her calm stood a kind of quiet fury, an unshakable truth that refused to bend. Elira's thoughts drifted back to the one face that haunted her dreams, the human she had met during the Earth Peace Summit 2 cycles ago. His name was Elias Corrin, a translator assigned to represent the Terran delegation. He had no special rank, no power, no noble blood, just a warm voice and a pair of eyes that seemed to see her not as a princess but as a person. He had smiled at her when others bowed. He had listened when others calculated. And for the first time in her life, Elira had felt alive. The Empress's voice tore her from her thoughts. "Do you understand what you risk, Elira? The Council will brand you heretic. The people will call you lost. You could lose your claim, your freedom, perhaps your life." "I understand," Elira replied, her tone steady, her heart trembling beneath. "But I will not live a life that feels like a cage. I will not bond with someone chosen by tradition. I want to choose love, not lineage." The chamber fell into a vacuum of silence. Even the light seemed to dim, as if the cosmos itself leaned closer to hear her next words. Elira stepped forward, shoulders straight, voice rising, gentle but unyielding. "I want a human. His name is Elias Corrin of Earth, and I will bring him to Arendor myself." Then she bowed, not in submission, but in finality, and walked out of the hall, leaving behind a stunned empire and a mother who watched her daughter's silhouette fade into the radiance of rebellion. Outside, under the glow of twin moons, Elira whispered to herself, half in fear, half in hope, "Elias, will you still remember me?" The night sky above Earth was nothing like the luminous storms of Arendor, no glowing auroras, no cosmic rivers of light. Yet to Elias Corrin it was beautiful in its quiet simplicity. He stood alone on the terrace of the Global Peace Embassy, watching the stars fade into the city haze. Somewhere among them, he knew, was her world. Elira. He whispered her name softly, as if afraid the air would steal it. It's been 2 years. 2 years since he had stood in the presence of the alien princess who had changed everything he believed about the universe. 2 years since their brief, forbidden friendship had ended with her sudden departure back to Arendor. Elias still remembered her. Every word, every look. The way her laughter seemed to shimmer in the air, like a note too pure for instruments to capture. And the way she had once touched his hand, curious, cautious, almost reverent, as though she were memorizing what human warmth felt like. He had told no one about that night. How could he explain that an alien princess, heir to a galactic empire, had spoken to him about loneliness, about the burden of perfection, about how the stars themselves sometimes felt like prison walls? He missed her, but she was a star, and he was dust. So when the sky above New Geneva suddenly shimmered with a beam of violet light that split the clouds like a sword, Elias thought for a moment he was dreaming. The air rippled. People screamed. Hover vehicles swerved as a massive crystalline vessel descended from orbit, its hull gleaming with shifting patterns of light that no earth metal could imitate. The emblem upon it glowed unmistakably, the royal seal of Arendor. Every broadcast, every network, every drone eye in the city turned toward the ship as it hovered above the embassy. And then, she appeared. A projection of Princess Elira flickered. Across the sky, towering above the buildings, radiant and solemn. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of galaxies. People of Earth, she began, her tone both regal and trembling with something deeply human. I am Elira Valon of the Arendor Empire. I come not as ruler, but as one who seeks what your kind calls love. The crowd gasped, reporters shouted, cameras flashed. But Elias just stood there, frozen, his heart pounding in disbelief. 2 cycles ago I met one among you, Elira continued. He reminded me of what it means to feel, not as an heir to a throne, but as a soul seeking another. His name is Elias Corin, and I have come to see him again. A wave of astonishment swept through the Earth delegation. Elias's communicator exploded with messages. What is this? Is that you? She's naming you on global feed. But he couldn't move. Couldn't think. Only her voice anchored him. Then the ship's hatch opened. A beam of white light descended to the ground, scanning the crowd, until it stopped at him. Her words echoed once more. Elias Corin of Earth. Will you come with me? Elias looked around. Everyone was staring. Security, reporters, scientists. He saw the fear in some eyes, awe in others. And inside himself, he felt both. He could run, pretend he didn't hear, pretend this wasn't real. But then he remembered the way she had once said, "If I ever come for you, will you trust me?" He took a deep breath, then another, and stepped forward. The light surrounded him gently, lifting him from the ground. The sound of the crowd faded into silence as the beam drew him upward toward the waiting ship. Through the haze of light, he saw her, standing there, in the docking bay, her eyes shining with tears that glowed faintly in the starlight. "You came," she whispered. He smiled, breathless. "You asked." The doors closed behind them, sealing Earth away. As the ship rose into the stratosphere, Elias realized that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. And yet, strangely, he wasn't afraid, because somehow in the heart of the universe, someone as unreachable as a princess had chosen him. The royal vessel Seraphion sliced through the cosmos like a blade of light, carrying only 2 souls who should never have met again. Elias stood by the vast window of the observation deck, his reflection merging with the swirl of galaxies beyond. The hum of alien engines, soft and melodic, filled the silence between them. Elira approached quietly. Her ceremonial robes shimmered with faint bioluminescent threads, symbols of her royal lineage, but her posture carried none of the arrogance her title once demanded. "Arendor is still days away," she said softly. "You must rest, Elias." He turned toward her, half smiling. "I'm afraid I'm too busy trying to believe this isn't a dream." Her lips curved faintly. Dreams are powerful things on your world. We are taught they are fragile illusions. But perhaps that's why I envy humans. You give meaning to things even when they are uncertain. Their eyes met. And for a moment, the silence between them became something alive. Gentle, questioning, fragile. Then Elias asked what had been burning inside him since she appeared in the skies above Earth. Why did you do this, Elira? Why risk everything? Your empire, your future, all for me? Her eyes lowered. Because the stars never felt as bright as the day I met you. He felt his heart stutter. I grew up surrounded by perfection, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. Every choice dictated. Every feeling measured. Even love was arranged, not felt. But you... She looked up again, her voice barely a whisper. You looked at me without fear, without awe. You saw me, and for the first time I wasn't a princess. I was alive. Elias was silent. He wanted to speak, to reach out, to tell her what her words meant. But the weight of it all pressed down like the vacuum of space. After a moment, he said quietly, You don't know what they'll do when we arrive, do you? Illyra's gaze darkened. I know exactly what they'll do. The faint glow of her markings dimmed. My mother has already called an emergency convocation. The High Council will demand your exile, perhaps even your execution. And me? She took a breath that shook slightly. They will strip me of my crown. Elias stared at her, stunned. Then why bring me here?
Because if I must lose everything, she said firmly, then I want to lose it for something real. The words hung in the air, unbreakable, raw, beautiful. Elias turned away, trying to steady his breathing.
Outside, the stars blurred as the ship jumped through light tunnels, threads of energy streaking like veins of lightning through the cosmos. He finally spoke, voice low. You shouldn't have done this for me, she smiled faintly. You humans always say that when you care about someone. They shared a long, silent moment, neither daring to move closer, neither willing to step away. Then, the ship's holographic aide, an androgynous being of blue light, materialized before them. Your Highness, it announced, we are entering restricted Arendor space. The Imperial fleet has locked onto our signal. They are demanding your identification code and purpose of travel. Elias's stomach tightened. That doesn't sound welcoming. It isn't, Elira said grimly. They're preparing to intercept us. She turned to the aide. Tell them the Princess of Arendor returns with her chosen bond. The hologram flickered uncertainly. That declaration will trigger automatic judgment proceedings. I know, she replied. Steady as stone, Elias looked at her, this fragile, luminous being who had once seemed untouchable, and saw now not a royal heir, but someone willing to face a galaxy's wrath for what she believed in. He took a slow breath. Then let me face it with you. She turned toward him, eyes wide with surprise. He stepped closer, voice firm now. If this is your world, your empire, then I'll stand beside you in it, no matter what they decide. Her lips parted in disbelief, then softened into something almost like wonder. You humans, she whispered, almost laughing, are either fearless or foolish. Probably both, he said, smiling faintly. The ship trembled as fleets of golden ships appeared on the radar, surrounding them in perfect formation. Elira reached out, her hand trembling as it found his. Then Elias Corrin of Earth, she said softly. Let the stars witness what they've never seen before. Outside, the void blazed with light as the Seraphian entered the shadow of Arendor, two souls standing hand in hand, defying an empire. The royal capital of Arendor Prime glittered beneath the shadow of its twin suns, a world of silver spires, suspended bridges and oceans that glowed with living light. But today its beauty hit a storm. News had spread faster than any pulse wave could travel. The princess has returned, with a human. Elias felt the stares as he stepped onto the marble causeway beside Elira. The air shimmered with thousands of floating holographic eyes, citizens watching across the empire. Soldiers in crystalline armor formed walls of discipline, their gaze fixed forward. Yet their thoughts were loud enough for him to feel. An intruder, a defilement, a curiosity. Elias walked beside Elira anyway. He kept his head high, though his pulse thundered in his ears. The sheer scale of the palace gates, towering arcs carved from living crystal, made him feel impossibly small. But when he looked at her, he found strength. Elira's hand brushed against his for only a second. "Don't let them see your fear," she whispered. "They'll mistake it for weakness, and humanity deserves more than that." The gates opened. Inside the hall of the celestial crown, the Empress sat on a throne that seemed grown from starlight itself. Her robes cascaded in waves of gold and ivory, her eyes sharp enough to cut through silence. Around her, the High Council assembled, a dozen beings of unimaginable age and power. Elias and Elira stopped before them. The hall echoed with nothing but the faint hum of the Empire's heart. Then the Empress spoke. "Elira Valon, Princess of Arendor, you stand accused of defying royal decree, violating the purity of succession and bringing into our domain a lower species without sanction." Her voice was calm, her words lethal. Elira bowed her head, not in shame but in respect. "I stand as accused, Mother, but I do not repent." A ripple of murmurs passed through the council. Elder Velan rose, his expression burning with fury. "You dare bring this creature into our sacred court? His kind has barely tamed their own planet." Elias clenched his fists. Every instinct screamed to defend himself, but he held back. This was her fight for now. Elira turned to the elder, her voice crystalline and steady. "And yet he has done what none of us have dared. He feels without measure. He forgives without reason. He dreams without limits. Tell me, Elder, can you say the same for yourself?" Valen's expression faltered. The Empress rose slowly, her aura dimming the light around her. "This is not about admiration, Elira. This is about survival. The Arendor bloodline has safeguarded peace for 10 millennia. Our strength is unity. If we allow weakness, emotion to guide us, the Empire falls." "Emotion is not weakness," Elira replied. "It is the pulse that gives meaning to strength." "Spoken like a child," the Empress said coldly. Her gaze turned to Elias, piercing and unreadable. "Human. Step forward." Elias obeyed, the sound of his footsteps echoing across the hall. "Tell me," the Empress said, "why do you think you are worthy of standing beside my daughter?" The question wasn't a challenge, it was a blade. Elias swallowed hard. Then slowly he raised his head. "Because I don't," gasps filled the hall. Even Elira's eyes widened. He continued, voice firm but humble. "I'm not worthy of her crown, her empire, or her power. I'm just a man. But I love her. And love doesn't ask for permission, it asks for courage. If she believes I'm worth fighting for, then I'll spend my life proving she wasn't wrong." The chamber fell utterly still. Even the hum of the crystals seemed to fade. The Empress studied him long and hard. Then finally she said, "Your words are bold for one so fragile." Elias met her gaze. "Maybe. But sometimes fragile things endure what strong things break beneath." Something flickered behind her eyes, an emotion quickly buried. The council erupted in debate. Voices clashed, tradition versus hope, purity versus evolution. Some called for Elias's exile. Others whispered that perhaps the princess's madness hid a deeper truth. Finally, the Empress raised her hand, silencing all. "The law demands balance," she declared. "If the princess claims this human as her chosen, then he must prove himself before the eyes of the Empire." Elira stepped forward sharply. "Mother, please," but the Empress's tone brooked no argument. "He shall undergo the trial of the stars. If he survives, your union will be recognized. If he fails, humanity will never be spoken of again." Elias felt his blood run cold. "Trials of the stars?" The Empress turned away, her voice echoing like judgment. "A test that no human has ever survived." Elira's hand found his, trembling despite her defiance. "Elias, don't do this," he looked at her, heart pounding. "If this is what it takes to stand beside you, then I will." Outside, the suns burned brighter, as if the universe itself leaned closer to witness what would come next. They brought him to the Spire of Ascension, a colossal tower rising from the surface of Arendor Prime into the black sea of space. It was said that even the gods dared not look down from its peak. The Arendorans gathered in silence as Elias stood at the base, clothed not in armor, but in simple fabric suited for humans. Beside him stood Elira, radiant in ceremonial silver, her eyes bright with tears she could not shed. "Elias," she whispered, gripping his hand, "you don't have to do this. No human has ever faced the trial. It was designed for our kind, our minds, our bond with the light stream. It will crush you. He looked at her with a small, trembling smile. If I run now, they'll think you were wrong about me. I can't let that be the story they tell of us, her voice cracked. This isn't about pride, this is about your life. He brushed his thumb across her glowing skin. And you're my reason to live. Elira's breath caught. For a moment, the universe felt too quiet. Then a metallic chime echoed through the spire, and the gate before them opened. The Empress and the High Council watched from their suspended platform above. The human shall undergo the threefold trial, the Empress declared. He must pass through mind, body, and spirit. Only then will the stars recognize his worth. Elias nodded once, steady though his heart thundered like war drums. As he stepped inside, the gate sealed shut behind him with a sound like the closing of eternity. The first trial. Mind. Elias found himself floating in a vast void. No light, no ground, no sound. And then a voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. Human mind, defined by chaos. Let us see if you can endure clarity. Images burst into existence. His childhood, his mistakes, the moment he watched his father die. The wars he survived, the times he doubted his own worth. Every failure sharpened, magnified, mocked him. You are small, the voice whispered. Weak. You cannot even master your own pain. How can you stand beside a being of light? He clutched his head, gasping. The darkness pressed in like gravity, his fears screaming louder than sound. But somewhere within the noise he heard her voice, soft, steady, remembered. Elira. Humans give meaning to things even when they are uncertain. He closed his eyes, drew a shaky breath and whispered, Then let uncertainty be my strength. The darkness cracked. The images shattered into a rain of light. When he opened his eyes, the void was gone. He had passed the first trial. The second trial, body. He awoke in a storm of gravity and flame. The air burned, the ground quaked, and colossal stone sentinels formed from molten rock rose before him. Endure, their voices thundered. Every instinct screamed to flee. But Elias remembered his training on Earth, his soldiers' discipline, and the stubborn will that had carried humanity through its darkest eras. He ducked, rolled, leapt, every movement raw, desperate, human. He wasn't faster or stronger than them, but he was unpredictable. Where they struck with precision, he fought with improvisation. A blast of molten heat knocked him to the ground. His arm burned, pain exploding up his nerves. But instead of fear, he laughed, a sound wild and defiant. Is that all you've got? He surged up, dodged another strike, and drove a shard of broken crystal into the sentinel's core. It shattered, collapsing into dust. The others fell silent, then bowed their massive heads. He collapsed, panting, skin burned and bleeding, but alive. Trial 2. Complete, a voice whispered. The third trial, spirit. When he opened his eyes, he stood before a mirror of light. In it stood himself, but changed. Colder, harder. A reflection of what he could become if he let power and pride consume him. To love one of the stars, the reflection said, you must become one or be destroyed by them. Choose. Elias stared at it, trembling. If becoming one of you means losing what makes me human, then I choose to stay me. The reflection's eyes blazed. Then you will burn. Maybe, Elias whispered. But at least I'll burn for something real. He reached into the mirror, touched the light, and it shattered, flooding him with warmth instead of pain. A voice, the voice of the trial itself, spoke gently. And so the human endures. Not through power. Not through perfection, but through heart. The chamber dissolved into light. When the gates of the spire finally opened, Elira ran forward, tears breaking free at last. Elias staggered out, bloodied but standing. The Empress rose slowly. The entire council was silent. He survived, she said, almost in disbelief. Elira knelt beside him, clutching his hands. You did it, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Told you. I'm stubborn. Above them, the twin suns flared brighter, as if the universe itself approved. The great bells of Arendor Prime tolled across the shining towers, their song carried through air and light. For the first time in history, the impossible had happened. A human had survived the trial of the stars. Elias stood before the gathered masses in the Grand Plaza, his wounds still fresh but his eyes steady. Behind him, Elira walked forward in full ceremonial regalia, the crest of her house restored upon her chest. She turned toward the sea of onlookers, thousands of Arendorans, faces shimmering with disbelief and awe. Her voice, amplified through the city's living crystal, was clear and steady. "My people, you have seen the truth for yourselves. A human, one of those we called frail and flawed, has faced the same trials that shaped our very civilization." And he did not yield. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "You call us perfect," she continued, "but perfection without compassion is emptiness. Strength without empathy is tyranny. Elias Quran showed us what it means to fight not for blood, not for legacy, but for love. And that is a strength we have long forgotten." Her words rippled through the crowd like light touching water. Up above, in her royal chamber, the Empress watched from the balcony, her expression unreadable, her fingers tightened around the railing. She had seen her daughter's rebellion, her courage, and the human's impossible endurance. When the speech ended, Elira turned, walking up the luminous stairway to where her mother stood. The guards hesitated, but the Empress raised her hand, letting her pass. Inside, the air was thick with silence. The Empress's robes whispered as she turned, "You have defied me, shamed the council, and risked war with every ascendant house in the empire. And yet, your conviction remains unbroken." Elira bowed her head. "Because I believe the empire must evolve, or it will die." Her mother studied her face, then glanced past her, to Elias, who had followed quietly to the chamber doors. "You risked your life for her," the Empress said, addressing him. "Why?" Elias hesitated. "Because she gave me something no one ever has." "And what is that, human?" "Purpose," he said simply. "The kind that doesn't come from orders or nations, but from caring about someone more than yourself." The Empress regarded him in silence for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly. "Do you love her, truly?" Elias's voice didn't waver. "More than anything." "And you would stay here," she pressed, "in a world that may never accept you? Away from your people, your son, your planet?" "Yes," he said. "Because my home isn't where I was born. It's where she is." The Empress's gaze softened, barely perceptible, but enough for Elira to see it. A flicker of memory passed through her mother's eyes, a long-lost moment, a choice once denied to her by the very laws she had upheld. She turned away, her voice quiet but trembling. "When I was young, I too loved someone beyond our kind. I buried it in duty, and with it I buried myself." Elira's breath caught. "Mother!" The Empress faced them again, regal but changed. "Your love defies reason, but perhaps reason is not what the stars ask of us." She stepped down from her throne, something no ruler had done in 1,000 years, and placed her hand gently upon Elias's shoulder. "The trial has spoken. The empire will honor its law. You are bound now not by decree but by truth." Elira's eyes filled with tears. "You mean—" "Yes," her mother said softly. "Your bond will be recognized. The human will live as your equal." The hall erupted with murmurs outside, disbelief, joy, outrage, but none of it mattered. Elias and Elira stood motionless, their eyes locked in a moment too profound for words. Elias finally whispered, voice cracking, "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," the Empress said, her expression unreadable but her tone warm. "You reminded me what it feels like to be alive." That night, Arendor Prime glowed brighter than ever before. The skies shimmered with auroras of celebration. Elias stood on the balcony of the royal spire, the twin suns setting beyond silver mountains. Elira joined him, the faint light reflecting in her violet eyes. "You changed everything," she said quietly. He smiled. "No, we did." She leaned against him, her voice trembling with both relief and wonder. "You don't know what they'll call us now." He looked at her. "What?" She smiled faintly. "The ones who dared." Above them, the stars of Arendor blazed brighter, as if the universe itself had just taken its first hopeful breath in millennia. The day of their union dawned under twin suns rising together, a rare celestial alignment that Arendorans called the convergence of hearts. For centuries it had been a symbol of divine harmony, but today it meant something new. Today it meant a human would stand beside the princess of Arendor. The Grand Plaza was transformed into a sea of shimmering light. Millions watched, both in person and through the great holographic clouds drifting above cities across the empire. On distant colonies, miners paused their work, scholars stopped their lectures, and soldiers lowered their weapons. Every corner of Arendor was watching history being written, and in the center of it all, Elias Corrin waited. He stood at the base of the celestial bridge, dressed not in Arendoran regalia, but in garments woven from both worlds, a hybrid design of Earth's soft fabrics and Arendor's glowing silks. Every thread shimmered faintly with starlight. The music began, low, haunting, celestial. Then she appeared. Elira descended the luminous steps, her gown a living constellation, flowing with liquid silver. Her crown was simple, her expression serene, but her eyes held 1,000 galaxies of emotion. The crowd fell utterly silent. When she reached him, their hands met, and for a heartbeat the air around them trembled, not from power, but from the sheer weight of what it meant. A union once unthinkable, now undeniable. The Empress stepped forward. The light of her crown dimmed in reverence. She looked at her daughter, then at the human who had endured the impossible. "Arendor has stood for 10 millennia, she began, her voice echoing across the stars. We believed strength lay in purity, that perfection came from control. But today we are reminded that true strength lies in the courage to love the unknown." Her gaze softened as it fell upon them both. "By law and by heart, by trial and by truth, let the stars witness the joining of Elira Valon of Arendor and Elias Corrin of Earth. May their bond remind us all that even the smallest light can change the course of a galaxy." The audience erupted, not with ceremony, but with feeling. Some cheered, some wept, some simply stood in awe. The stars themselves seemed to burn brighter as the twin suns aligned fully overhead, casting a single beam of golden light upon them. Elira turned to Elias, her eyes glistening. "Do you still fear the stars?" He smiled softly. "Not anymore. Not when you're standing in them with me." She laughed, a sound that shimmered through the air like crystal rain. Then, without hesitation, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, the ancient Arendoran gesture of eternal union. The moment they touched, the air ignited with light, pure, warm, living light that swept through the city and beyond. Every being who saw it felt something shift inside them. A reminder that compassion was not a weakness, that empathy could rebuild even empires. Later that night, the city celebrated. Firelight and auroras painted the sky as human musicians played beside Arendoran harmonics, blending melody and energy into a song no one had ever heard before. Elias and Elira stood on a quiet balcony overlooking the endless glow below. "Do you think they'll accept me?" he asked quietly. Elira smiled, leaning against him. "They already have. It will take time, yes, but hearts change slower than laws. Still, they do change." He looked up at the stars, vast, endless, no longer foreign. "When I was a boy, I used to look at these and wonder if someone out there was looking back." She turned her head toward him. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I know." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the distant hum of the city and the rhythm of their joined breaths filled the night. Then Elira whispered, "Do you realize what you've done, Elias Corrin? You changed how my entire world sees yours." He chuckled softly. "No, you changed them. I just reminded them what it means to feel." She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his, glowing faintly from the connection of their two energies, human warmth and alien light merging perfectly. Far above them, the twin suns crossed paths completely, marking the first time in Arendor's history that their light fused into one. Elira looked up, smiling through tears. "The stars are watching." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Then let them see what love looks like." The light bathed them both, human and alien, fragile and eternal, two souls who had rewritten the destiny of their worlds, and for the first time in the long, silent history of the stars, the universe smiled back.